أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم مصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجه. Hello everyone and welcome to the 10th week of Tadabbur and the Quran. Today we're going to talk a little about Tadabbur and then we will study chapter 91 Surah Ash-Shams. We read some verses last week and we learned through these four verses that our duty about Quran is doing tadabbur on those chapters and doing the sequential study. Tadabbur means sequential study, words by words, verses by verses, and chapter by chapter. So through these four verses in Quran, we learned that God invited us to do tadabbur on Quran. But we know that when we do study Quran, we cannot understand it easily. Sometimes it's even difficult to understand a verse, and sometimes it's difficult to understand the connection between verses, and sometimes it's difficult to understand the main goal of one chapter. So we are wondered why there is these difficulties to understand Quran. There is three main reasons. There are also other reasons, but I believe these are main reasons that we cannot understand Quran easily. The first one is different language. Quran is in Arabic, and we have another language, probably Persian, English, French, or whatever. And it's difficult for us to understand a text which is from another language. Even for the Arabs, Arabs have difficulties to understand Quran because the Arabic of Quran is different from their Arabic. It's from 1400 years ago. So it's not even easy for Arabs to understand the Arabic of Quran. So one problem is the specific language of Quran. The second problem is a different era. Quran was sent down 1400 years ago, and those people who were in the society, they knew what is happening on that society, and what is the current problem on that society that God sent down that specific chapter. So they were familiar with those actually concepts that Quran were talking about it. But we are not on those era. We are not on that specific time. We don't know what was those events. We don't know what was those problems on that society that got sent down that chapter. So for this reason, it's not easy for us to make a connection between the chapter and between our current problems. And the third reason that we cannot understand Quran easily is lacking the Prophet recitation and his interpretation. When God sent down a chapter, the Prophet was among people and he recited for them and he explained those verses which were difficult for people to understand it. But we don't have that. We don't have even direct access to our imams. So this is the third reason that we cannot easily understand Quran. But how can we solve these problems and how can we understand Quran easily? For the first point, having different language, we can use those translation which different different Islamic scientists and different philosophers, they translate the Quran into another language, for example, from Arabic to English, from Arabic to French, and stuff like that. We can use those translation. For example, in this class, we are using a translation which is translated by our professor in Tadabbur, and he translated into Persian, and we translated into English, and we can use this translation and we can solve the first problem. About the second problem, different era. We know that Quran is not specifically for a time and or for a specific culture or for a specific group of people. Quran is for any time and it's for every country, it's for every culture. So we have to be aware that if Quran was sent down for solving a specific problem among Muslim society, it doesn't mean that it's specifically for that time. It's for similar problems and similar issues on other society and in any time. As we are not on that specific time, 1400 years ago, to understand what happened that got sent down this chapter, it's not going to make a big problem for us because we can read that chapter verse by verse and understand the issue that this chapter is trying to solve it. As we experienced through these chapters that we had, when we read a chapter, we can easily find out that this chapter is talking about this problem. It means there was a problem like this on that society and God sent down this chapter to solve that problem. In a similar way, we can find out that problem or that issue among us, and we can understand that this chapter is trying to solve that problem. For example, there are poor people and the other people, wealthy people, don't care about this group of people. They don't care about the economic situation that they have and they don't try to help them. So God sent down a chapter 1400 years ago to solve this problem among that society. But we can see that there is still that problem among us. There are poor people who need our help, but there are many wealthy people who don't care about them, and Quran is talking to them currently. So using Tadabbur method, when we read a chapter verse by verse, we can figure out the issue that this chapter is trying to solve. So for solving the second problem, we can use Tadabbur method to understand the similar situation that was in that society that got sent down that chapter. And for the third problem, lacking the prophet's recitation, what does it mean? For example, in Surah Quraysh, there is a verse which says, فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ. We don't know when the prophet recited this verse, did he said فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ, or he said فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ? On which one of these words the prophet emphasized on it? Which one is the most important part of this verse? We don't have that recitation, right? But if we read the next verse and if we use Tadabbur method, then we can find out which part of this verse is the most important point of it. For example, the verse after this one, it says, the verse says, فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُم مِّن خَوْفٍ. So the next verse is describing Rab, and it's talking about the Lord. It means the most important part of that verse was emphasizing on Rab and worshipping Rab. Rab was the important part of that verse because the next verse is explaining about Rab and is describing Rab. And this is the method that this is the way that Tadabbur can help us to understand and somehow find out the most important part of those verses and to understand the prophet recitation. Although we do not have access to the prophet recitation or his interpretation, Tadabbur can help us to understand most part of it and to solve this problem. So these three main problems which cause difficulty to understand Quran easily can be solved through Tadabbur. The first one by having the translation of Quran into our language. The second one by reading those verses one by one and understand the whole concept of the chapter. Then we can find out what was the problem on those years in among the Muslim society. And the third one, we can, when we read those verses one by one by Tadabbur method, then we can find out what was the prophet's recitation and his interpretation. So this was the most part of my talk about Tadabbur for today. Now we can start Surah Ash-Shams. Before the class, we talked about it a little, and you discussed your actually categorization on these verses. Some of you said this chapter has two paragraphs, and some of you said that this one has 3 paragraphs. I believe that this chapter has 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph is verses 1 to 10, and the second paragraph is verses 11 to 15. And why did I divided it into 2 paragraphs? Because verses 1 to 10 has actually there are several swears in these verses, and after those swears we can find the response to those swears, and that part is done. And after verse 10 there is no explanation about the response of those swears, and there is nothing related to those swears and their responses. But verse 11 start talking about Samud, which was a tribe that they did something and then God punished them. Verses 11 to 15 is about Samud and their story. Based on that, we can see that this chapter has 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph about some surahs and the response to that, and then the second paragraph is actually a story about Samud. So when we read it, I will again show you how and why I divided it into these 2 paragraphs. Before I start reading this chapter, I want to mention this point about this chapter. This chapter has the maximum number of surahs in Quran. This chapter has 11 surahs in it. Although it's a short chapter, but it has 11 swears to it. It means God wants to emphasize on a point that people are heedless of it and people don't care about it. It means that concept is very important because God swears 11 times, and he even swears to himself 3 times. So it means that concept in this chapter is very important. And although this is a very short chapter, but we are recommended to read it in many praise and many of our celebration, and in many of actually Islamic practices. The Surah Ash-Shams is actually very recommended to be read. So there must be a very important concept on it. We are going to find out what is that important concept that God wants to emphasize on it by swearing 11 times. So let's start our study. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the entirely beneficent, the ever merciful. وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا, swear by the sun and its brightness. So when we see there is a swear, then we will be aware that there is something important that God wants to emphasize on it. But before trying to read all of this swear and reach to that point, I want to invite you to think about each of these swears also. These swears are also important. God is swearing to some specific creatures, and these swears important, and also there is a connection between these swears. They are very well related together. When we are reading it, we can find out that they are very well related together. So instead of reading these parts very quick and reaching to that part which is about that point that God wants to emphasize on it, let's think about also these creatures that are actually magnificent creature, and we have to think about them. We have to study them. We have to think about the beneficent that they have for us, for other creatures. For example, sun. Sun is like a light source for the earth, and there are many benefits from this light source for us. It's not only for lightening our daytime. We have the heat from it, we have energy from the sun, and the plants and trees and flowers, all of them growing by the sunlight, and many other benefits related to the sun. And the distance between sun and earth is a very accurate system, and the system that earth is and other planets also, they rotate around the sun. It's a very actually unique and wonderful creature, and we can think about it. I don't want to spend too much time in this lecture talk about sun only, but you can study it, you can think about it after the class. And think about the benefits that it has for us, and the way that it's actually very well organized, and the way that it's doing his job or her job, uh, without any actually specific problem or any specific issue for like probably several thousand years. So the first part is swearing by the sun and its brightness. About the haha, I translated it into brightness, the brightness of the sun. It's refers to the sun, and its brightness means I swear by the brightness of sun. So for Duhaha, some people and some interpretation says that Duha means the forenoon light of the sun, and some of them said that this is the maximum light of the sun. Both can be accepted. For us, it means for us the important part is that God wants to swear to the brightness of the sun. And second verse, it says, وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا, and swear by the moon when it follows it. It in this verse refers to the sun, and it means swear by the moon when it follows the sun. It doesn't mean that there is a path like a road and sun is going and the moon is after the sun. It's not like that. It's about the light from the moon. The light of moon is not actually generated by moon, but it's actually the reflection of the light of the sun. Moon is reflecting the light of the sun, and in this way we can uh, understand the meaning of talaha. Talaha means um, following it. Actually, the moon is reflecting the light of sun. In this way, it's following the light of the sun. وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا جَلَّاهَا, and swear by the day when it shines it. It refers to the earth, because during the daytime, when it's daytime, the light is shining and actually highlighting everything on the earth. Everything on the earth during the night, when it's in the darkness, we cannot see anything. But when it's daytime, everything on the earth is shining. وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَاهَا, and swear by the night when it covers it. It again is referring to the earth, because when it's night, during the nighttime, darkness cover everything. Darkness and nighttime is like a blanket. It's like a coating that can cover everything in it. So everything during the nighttime is covered by the darkness. وَالسَّمَاءِ وَمَا بَنَاهَا, and swear by the sun, by the sky, and by that power which established it. It refers to the sky. This verse swear by the sky, and then it swear by a specific power that established the sky. It means God. This is referring to God, but it's using wama, ma, or which is describing something like an object. And it's not usually common to use it for human, ma in Arabic, or for human or for God. When it's using ma in Quran, it means that it's for humiliating that thing or for glorifying and honoring that thing. Here, obviously, it's for glorifying God, and it's actually for honoring Him, to say that what is that magnificent power who established the sky. So this is one of those surah that God swore to Himself. And then, وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا طَحَاهَا, and swear by the earth and by that magnificent power who spread it out. Again, here is which or wama. Ma, I translated into which because God wants to use a a word which is not common because it wants to invite us to think about it. Is it for humiliation or is it for glorification? Obviously, it's for glorification because when we look at the earth and how it was spreaded and how it is well organized for all creature. When we think about this, then we can find out that it should be a magnificent power, and we have to glorify that power. We have to glorify God for creating the earth and spreading it. These were actually 6 verses, and it has several surah on it. The first pair of the verses, it's talking about sun and moon. These two creatures are very well related together. Sun and moon, these are like two lighting system for us on the earth and also for other creatures, and they cause many natural phenomena on the earth, which are very necessary part of our life. And these are actually two creatures very well related together. And then the other pair is about day and night. They are like two natural phenomena that are created by the earth move and also by sun and moon. So these two natural phenomena which are created by earth, moon, sun, and also moon, uh, these are actually again say two phenomena which are very well related together. وَالسَّمَاءِ وَمَا بَنَاهَا وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا تَحَاهَا. These two also are very well related, sky and earth, and everything that we talked about it, sun, moon, and all creatures are between these two, between earth and sky. And actually, day and night is happening for everything on the earth through all of these move. And generally these 6 verses is kind of a describing the we can say solar system and also um, our world in this earth, and it's kind of a describing those most important creature in this huge system. To mention that there is a huge organization in this system, and this system is very well balanced. Everything is doing his duty, everything is doing his job, and they're all following God's orders, and they cannot disobey. Everything is very well organized, and they're all doing their duties, and they're all balanced. After this, God swore to something else. وَنَفْسًا وَمَا سَوَّاهَا, and swore by the soul and by that power which proportioned it. Soul, it's talking about the human soul, swore by the soul, and also swear by that magnificent power, which means God, who proportioned the soul, which means soul is also very well proportioned, it's very well organized, and it was created in a balanced situation, very similar to the other creatures like sun, moon, daytime, nighttime, sky, earth. They were also created in a balanced way. They are very well organized, and human soul is also created in a very well organized situation, and it is balanced. It is very well proportioned. وَمَا سَوَّاهَا, which means your soul is very well proportioned. It's very similar to the other creature. But there is a different point about this balance of the soul compared to the other creature. What is that difference? Next verse is explaining it. فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا, then inspired it, which means this it is referring to the soul, to that soul which was created in a proportioned way. God inspired that soul to distinguish its wrong and its right. It means although God created our soul in a balanced way and it's very well proportioned, but he inspired that soul to distinguish what is right, what is wrong. We have choose. We have a choice, and we can choose things. And for that, we need to understand what is right, what is wrong. It's not the same for sun, moon, earth, sky. They don't need to because they don't need to choose. They are in the path and they are doing their job without actually, and they don't control any of it. God is managing them. But about our soul, God created it, and then we are the manager of it. We have to control it. We have to try to save this balance. We have to try to save it in a proportioned way. How? We need a tool. What is that tool? The inspiration about what is right and what is wrong. The inspiration doesn't mean that God taught us to do wrong things and right things. And it doesn't mean that God lead us to do right things and wrong things. God only inspired us, which means he gave us the knowledge of understanding and distinguishing what is right and what is wrong. If something is wrong, my soul is sensitive to it and start sending alarm like you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do that, this is a wrong thing. And if something is right, my soul is encouraging me to do it. This is a right thing to do it, you have to do it, I like you to do it, and stuff like that. This is the inspiration from the God. And it doesn't mean that God lead us to do wrong thing and wrong things, or he taught us to do wrong things or right things. He inspired us. So the main difference between our soul with other creature like sun, moon, and stuff like that is this ability. And when we can distinguish the right things and wrong things, we have the ability of understanding the wrong things and right things, and we have to choose. And this is our creation. But sun, moon, they are doing their job, and God is controlling them, and God is saving that balance, and they are in their well organization. But we have to try to preserve this balance. When our soul is balanced, we have to try to save it. We have to try to preserve it. If I want to bring an example, I want to talk about like containers. For example, this one, this is a container and there is something in it. This container is not sensitive about what's in it. If there is poison in it, it's not going to show anything. It's a non-sensitive container. If there is food in it, if there is a perfume in it, it doesn't matter. It's a non-sensitive container and it's not going to show anything. But for example, our stomach is a sensitive container and it shows a reaction to different things. If I eat a poisonous food, my stomach show reaction and it throws away that food because it is sensitive to bad things, or because it's sensitive to bad food or bad drink. Um, for example, like smoking. If I want to smoke, I would start coughing because my system is sensitive to that smoke and it will show reaction. But if I want to keep smoking after several times, then my system get used to it and it will lose the sensitivity to the smoke. It will get used to it and there wouldn't be any coughing after like several times when I get used to that smoke. It's about our soul also. Our soul is like a container and it's sensitive to whatever that we put in it. If we do right things, it will be satisfied. It is happy, like our stomach. When we eat a good food, it is happy. It can digest it very easy. But our soul is also like that. If I do something right, my soul would be happy with it. But if I want to do something wrong, my soul will start doing reaction to it. Why? Because it doesn't like it. And it's inspired by God. It is inspired by God that this is the wrong things. And soul is sensitive to it and it will start reactioning against that things and blaming me, talking to me, keep talking to me. This is a bad thing. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't talk like this and stuff like that. If I do that wrong thing, my sin or that wrong thing is like a layer of dust that cover my soul. Soul is like a mirror. This sensitive container is like a mirror, and it can show right things and wrong things. If I do a sin and ignoring my soul inspiration, then I will put a layer of dust on on this mirror. And then if I do that sin again, if I do another wrong things, if I do another wrong things, and then another wrong things, layer by layer, I will put many layers of the dust on this soul. And it's kind of a actually uh, burying this soul under many layers of dust. Our soul is a mirror, like a mirror, and it's like a sensitive container, and it can shows us what is right, what is wrong. But if we don't try to keep it clean, then it will lose the functionality. And then also these are some examples of virtues and vices for the right things and wrong things. Our soul is sensitive to all of these things. When we do virtues, it is happy and it knows that these are good things to do and it will encourage us to do it. But if we do vices, uh, our soul is sensitive to them and it can distinguish it and telling us that this is wrong thing, you shouldn't do that, and start blaming us. So these are two main categories of like right things and wrong things, like virtues and vices. So after these swears, then we can see the part of the responses to this swear. God swear to many things 11 times, swear to sun, its brightness, moon, day, night, sky, earth, and also the power who created the sky, and then soul, and then himself. Oh, about the Sama also, he again swears to himself who established it. So these are 11 swears in this chapter, in this paragraph. After so many swears, then this is the part of the responses to those swears. قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها. It means indeed he prospered who purified it. It means who purified the soul. And indeed he failed who buried it, who buried the soul. So this part is actually the response of the surah. These are the important concepts that God wants to emphasize on it. God swears 11 times to emphasize on this point that your soul is inspired about wrong things and right things, and I inspired your soul to distinguish them, but you have to try to keep cleaning it. You have to purify your soul. And if you want to have a permanent happiness in this life and on the other life, you have to keep cleaning this soul. Then this soul can have the functionality of distinguishing the right things and wrong things. But if someone don't try to keep cleaning and purifying the soul, he would fail. Why? Because he is burying this soul under so many layers of this dust, the dust of the sin. As I mentioned, our soul is like a mirror, and every sin that a person do is like a layer of dust, and it's covering that mirror, and that mirror will lose the functionality of showing us the wrong things and right things. Like the person that I said, smoking for several times, that person will have some coughing because he is sensitive to that smoke. But after several times, he will get used to it and there is no cough anymore. Our soul is like that. When we do sin, it starts reaction. And the soul is sensitive about the sin. But after several sin, those layer of dust will stop the reaction of the soul, and the soul cannot warn us anymore. So, وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا, it means the person who buried the soul will fail in this life and in the other life. This was the first paragraph. In the first paragraph, there were several swears and then the response to those swears. And the most important part that God wants to emphasize in this paragraph was this salvation as the result of soul purification, spiritual deterioration, and failure as the result of soul burial. So, if someone wants to achieve salvation, then that person should try to keep cleaning and purifying the soul. And if a person don't care about it and bury the soul under the layer of the dust, then he will fail in this life and in the other life. And we have to pay attention. It's talking about soul burial. It's about burying the soul. You cannot, and people cannot kill the soul. It's just burying it. It means it is not completely gone. And if that person try to cleaning the soul again, try to cleaning that mirror again, then it can start um, reaction. Like the person who is smoking, if he stops smoking after a while, then that system will start doing the reaction to the smoke again. That system became alive again and having that functionality again. It's the same about our soul. If the soul is buried under the layer of the dust of the sin, if we try to cleaning it again, then that soul will start reactioning again. So soul is the divine mirror of the recognition of virtues from vices. Whoever purifies this mirror and recognize right from wrong will achieve salvation, and whoever buries this mirror under sins will not benefit from it. So we have to learn from this paragraph that this is a very important duty in our life. God created this magnificent world, and he is controlling everything about it. He is the manager of it. Everything is very well balanced. Everything is very well organized in this world. And God is controlling all of this balance. About our soul, he mentioned that I created your soul and I made it in a balanced way. I made it very well organized. I made it very well proportioned. But you are the responsible for preserving this balance. We have to try to preserve this balance. We have to try to clean and purify our soul because we need our soul. We need our soul to recognize what is right and what is wrong. And we have to um, keep reading and reciting this chapter to be reminded that this is a very important duty. This is very important concept that God emphasized on it by 11 swears. And then verse 11, we are going to start reading the second paragraph. Verse 11 is talking about Thamud. Thamud was a tribe and they had a prophet. Um, his name was Saleh alayhi salam. And the story of Samud was mentioned several times in Quran, but here it's not going to tell us the story of Samud. It's just briefly talking about what they did and how God punished them. Very brief and like in only 5 verses. Uh, And okay, let's start reading this part. It says, كذب ثمود بتقواها. Thamud denied because of their transgression. Thamud, which is the name of that tribe, they denied. Why? Because they transgressed. They transgressed, and because of that, they start denying. What they denied? إذ انبعث أشقاها, when the most rich of them was sent forth. What was the deny that they did? Actually, they choose someone from their tribe as a like representative from their group, and Quran described him as Ashqa, which means the most rich. He chose that person and they sent him forth to do what? فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله وسقياها. So God's messenger said to them, this is the she-camel of God, and let her drink. Based on this verse, we can figure out that um, that person, the most rich, was chosen to do something about the camel of God. What was the camel of God? What was the story? Based on the other chapters of Qur'an, we can figure out that Saleh was the prophet of Samud, and they asked their prophet to show them a miracle. And Saleh alayhi salam asked God for a miracle, and then a camel, a pregnant camel, came out from a rock. The rock mm, was split open, and a pregnant camel came out of that rock. So it was a huge miracle. And Saleh alayhi salam told those people that you have to take care of this miracle. This is the she camel of God, and you have to let her drink. And Saleh divided the actually drinking from, I don't know, it was a river or a spring among their city or village, whatever. There was a water there, river or a spring, and Salih alayhi salam told them that in this time is only camel's turn and she can drink the water, and in this time this is your turn, then you can drink the water. So about that water, Salih alayhi salam divided the time of using that water for the camel and for those people. But people started transgressing and they didn't like to let that camel to drink the water. What they did choose a person, the most rich, one of those people. They choose one of them and they sent him forth to do something about that camel, like killing that camel. And Salih alayhi salam warned them and told them that you have to take care of this camel. This is the she camel of God. This is a miracle. And in this verse, God didn't mention the name of the prophet. Instead of saying Saleh, it just says Rasulullah. Rasulullah means the prophet or the messenger of God. And it means it doesn't matter what was the name of that prophet. The important point is he was God's messenger and he was warning people about something that is related to God. And that is important. It doesn't matter what is the name of the prophet. Always, any prophet, any messengers of God, we have to listen to him because he is a messenger of God. So Salih alayhi salam warned them. But what did they do against his warning? فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها. So they denied it, which means they denied the prophet. They didn't listen to Salih alayhi salam. They denied the prophet. Then they killed her. They killed the camel. They killed the camel. Therefore, their Lord crushed them. فَدَمْدَمَ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّهُم. Their Lord crushed them. بِذَنبِهِمْ فَسَوَّاهَا. Why God crushed them? Because of their sin. Because killing that camel, that was the that was a miracle. It's a sin. It's a huge sin. And God crushed them because of this sin and made it equal. Fasawaha made it equal. About this part, made it equal. There are different interpretation. There are different interpretation. Two of them can be accepted. The one is made it equal means God crushed them and punished them and ruined their building and ruined their cities and made them equal to the soil. Made them equal to the soil. It means completely ruined, completely crushed. This is one interpretation that can be accepted. The other one means they did a sin and equal to that, God punished them. So their sin was really huge. They did a really bad thing and equal to that, God punished them. God punished them in a similar way. وَلَا يَخَافُ عُقْبَاهَا. And he does not fear its consequences. It means God does not fear what is happening next. What if I punish them? And maybe their family will stand against me and stuff like that. No, God does not fear, and God is not scared about any consequences after whatever that he wants to do. For example, a king might be scared about punishing a group of people, or whatever if the other group of people stand against me, or whatever if other people wants to do some protesting or stuff like that. No, that king might be scared, but it's not about God. God does not fear about any consequences, and if a group of people wants to do something, of course he is able to punish them, and he is not scared about the consequences of that punishment. This was the second paragraph of this chapter, and this paragraph is actually describing the Samud who stand against a prophet. A prophet is a person who we can see it by our eyes and we can hear it by our ear, and that person is like an external prophet. And our soul, which in the first paragraph God talked about it, it's like internal prophet. So the first paragraph and second paragraph are very well related in this way. The first paragraph was talking about the soul. The soul is like a internal prophet, that soul which is inspired by God about right things and wrong things, and it can tell us what is right, what is wrong. It's exactly like a prophet. Our soul is exactly like a prophet, but our soul is an internal prophet, and it can just tell us the general categories of the right things and wrong things. But the external prophet tell us everything in detail and show us every detail about a lifestyle that God wants us to have. So the problem of the Thamud people was actually the root of their transgression is soul purification in the first paragraph, which God talks about it. They didn't do soul purification. They didn't listen to their inspired soul. They didn't listen to the soul when it was telling them this is right, this is wrong. And they buried their soul. They buried the internal prophet. And because of that, they stand against the external prophet. When in a society, people try to keep cleaning the internal prophet, the soul. And when people listened to the internal prophet, then they would not stand against external prophet, because they have a clean and clear and pure soul, and that soul can tell them what is right, what is wrong. And in this way, they will also follow the external prophet. But when they didn't, those individuals, one by ones, all of them, they did bury the internal soul, and the consequence of burying the internal soul is standing against the external soul. I want to bold this part again. The relationship between the first paragraph and the second paragraph is this. When all of those people, one by one, when those individuals buries their soul, and when they bury the internal soul, the consequence of burying the internal soul is standing against the external soul, external prophet, sorry. So the second paragraph, what was the main point of it? The denial of the tribe of Thamud and the severe retribution of God. The tribe of Thamud denied the clear sign of God due to their transgression and got in trouble of the severe retribution of God. God punished them because of their sin and because they killed the miracle of God. And what was the main topic that the whole chapter wants to talk about it? Again, I want to remind you, this chapter has 11 words. It must be a very important point. What is that point? Pretending deniers who buried the divine mirror under sins. Actually, the second paragraph was supporting the first paragraph, because the second paragraph wants to show us that if people bury the internal prophet, they will stand against the external prophet. If someone buries his soul under sins, he will perish like the tribe of Samud, who transgressed due to the soul burial, then denied the clear sign of God. If those people had inspired soul, and if they didn't bury it, they would listen to their prophet and they would never do such a huge sin to be punished like this. So we are gonna ask God to help us to keep cleaning this inspired soul, which is like a internal prophet, and this is a huge responsibility. This is a very important responsibility, and this was a very important concept that we learned today. And we are trying to keep cleaning it, and we are asking God to help us to purify and clean our soul, and to understand what is right and what is right, and try to follow the external prophet also. Thank you so much for being with us. I hope you keep reading this chapter after the class, and try to be connected to this chapter through your heart. Now we can understand it here. Now our knowledge about Surah Ash-Shams is in a level that we can read this chapter easily and understand this chapter easily. But it's only in our thoughts, and it's in our mind. We have to be connected to it through your heart, hopefully. Thank you so much for being with us, and I hope to see you next week. Bye.